Hi everyone, welcome to Making Vinyl at Masterdisk. I'm Scott Hull, Chief Engineer and owner of Masterdisk, and joining me, as usual, is Garrett Robinson, one of our disc cutting engineers and mastering engineers here.
Hello.
We got a good topic for you this time. It's the test pressing. Let's start with one quick little subject, and that's the difference between a test pressing and a reference disc. And quite often people get that confused. The thing that gets cut in the mastering studio for audio quality control purposes is called a reference lacquer. It's also sometimes referred to as an acetate. Acetate goes way back.
It's an old word, right?
Yeah, they're no longer acetates, but people refer to that. If it helps you to distinguish, fine. I know what acetate means. It means reference lacquer. But that's different from a test pressing. After we make our cut and we send it to the plating plant, they make the stampers, do all the metal work, put it into the press, and they make actual records. Let's just show us what a test pressing generally looks like. So this is a plain white label, but it's a real record. Plain white labels, just because they don't know how many of these they're going to make, and they have to pre-make the labels. Some types of paper can absorb a little bit of moisture, and if there's any moisture content in the labels, when it gets pressed into the disc, the label will bubble as the moisture is trying to get out. So the labels that are going to go on your record have been baked and are put in a dry chamber and are waiting for your records to be made. They don't want to waste any on test pressings. You know, we talked before about the scribe number. This has GTM LP009 as its identifying number, and then it's got a V number from the plant, in this case Microforum, V1276059A. That's also an identifying number from the plant, and then of course it has our Masterdisk stamp and my initials. So the reference disc is how we monitor the quality of our cutting process. So that's before we've made the master, we make a reference disc. After we've made the master, it goes to the plant and they make the metal parts and they stamp a record. And we listen to the test pressing to quality control check the metal making part of the process and also the stamper and the mold. Most of those metal parts really can't be played. They're inverses, they're made from each other. We really can't identify any significant noises in them unless they're massive. So we have to wait until they're ready, put the stamper in the press, and make test pressings. Well, here's one of the other problems. The vinyl record press needs to completely get up to temperature, and to do that, it needs to replicate at least 20, 40, some places even 50 actual pressings before they get up to the kind of quality that you and I want to hear on a record. The first few that they take off are going to be kind of like that first waffle that you make, when you heat up the waffle iron and you pour it in, and if it's an old-fashioned waffle iron like my mom had, the first waffle went to the dog, because it was all stuck to the waffle iron. But miraculously enough, once the waffle iron was up to temperature and once it had done one waffle, the second one, would usually come loose better. I would get the second one. I'm just one step away from the dog. Then the third and fourth one would be better, and my father got the best ones. So that's what I'm saying, the pecking order. So we have to treat the test pressing as having potential problems that aren't really going to be problems in the final production. I'm going to have to get kind of detailed about it, but it's not really going to make a whole lot of sense. There's a bunch of different ways that the noises can get into the record as it's being pressed, but the most popular one is when little bits of the vinyl stick to the groove when the disc releases. The press works like this. There's a plate on the bottom, there's a plate on the top, and the room temperature and an extrusion or biscuit of vinyl gets thrown in with the two labels, and then steam gets pumped through those platters and it gets really hot and it splooges down on top of that biscuit, spreading all of the vinyl all the way out, even out beyond the edge of the disc. And then a knife comes around and cuts that. And then as soon as that knife is finished cutting, the steam is pumped out and cold water rushes in to cool the mold. And then it's released slightly. And the shrinkage of the vinyl causes it to then pop out of the mold as the vinyl cools. How long it stays in the press before it's cooled is an important determining factor on how little noise there's going to be. But all of these factors interact. If it stayed in too long, then it's going to have different types of errors, stitching problems and non-fill errors. If it's, non-fill if it's not pressed long enough, stitching errors if it's left in too long, and the vinyl sort of loses its shape too if it's gotten too warm, because it has to be cooled off fairly rapidly to maintain that intricate shape that it's got. So we listen back to test pressings in a very, very, very specific way. We know what the audio sounds like. We've quality control checked that up to this point. What we're really looking to find out is, were there any major flaws added to the project during the plating? So to do that, we take each side of this project and we play 2 test pressings. One all the way through, noting where the ticks are, and then another one all the way through, and we line those up very carefully. And if there was a tick on one and it wasn't on the other one, then we know that our stamper is okay. I love to use the candle making analogy because it's kind of simple and it's kind of something that everybody can understand. If you have a mold, say like a 2-part mold, it's going to go together to make a tin soldier, a nutcracker shaped candle. All right, you heat up the wax and you pour it in. You take it out and there's a defect, a spot, a hole somewhere where there isn't wax, or maybe a part of the shape that's a little rounded off, misformed, misshapen. That could either be that the wax didn't get into the space, there could have been air bubbles in it, there could have been any number of different reasons why that wax didn't take that proper shape, or there could be a fault of the mold. If you make a second one using the same techniques and it comes out and it has an absolutely identical defect in exactly the same place, and I mean exactly identical, then there's something wrong with the mold. Well, it's really what we're doing here. The mold is our stampers. You can't just listen to one side of a test pressing and evaluate the stamper, because you might hear all of these noises from where the vinyl stuck to the grooves. You might be hearing an elevated noise floor or once around noise that was really only because the test pressings were pulled off of the press early in the process. They make maybe 20 in total and send them out to the various people involved. I always insist that we get sent test pressings because it's the only way that I can help our clients make sure that they get everything that they paid for. The clients should also listen to it themselves to make sure that there are no surprises and nothing that they're not aware of, but they can rely on us for what I call a surface analysis, a surface check from the beginning to end, identifying any problems that exist in at least 2 different test pressings. Now here's an interesting point though. Sometimes that defect exists in the first and the second test pressings, but by the time you get to the 9th or 10th test pressings, that problem might have actually gone away. So without making enemies and without making people angry at me in the plant, I will send a test pressing report to everybody that's involved in the process, but also to the plant, and ask them to check their test pressings and see if they can find these same defects. And in some cases, they can actually play back the mother and see if they find the defect there. If the defect is in the mother and the client and I determine that we need to make it better, then we have to actually recut the lacquer and it has to be replated and I have to make test pressings again. It's really vital that we listen to test pressings though, because it's the only way that we can quality control check the plating process. If you're sending your digital files out to somebody to make you a record and a box of records show up without you checking the steps in between, don't be too surprised that it's not an amazing sounding record, because there's so many different ways for small but important defects to creep into the system. I know Garrett here has done a lot of test pressing evaluations. What's the challenge?
There's a few challenges. The challenge is remaining focused, listening on a very critical level for these tiny noises that almost start to blend in with the noise floor of the record, while keeping the goal in mind of what we're trying to accomplish as far as making the record the best possible for the consumer. It's a very labor-intensive review process. As much time as it takes to play back both sides of your record twice is at least how long it's going to take me or you to review for these surface issues.
Yeah, it's a process that we charge some for, but we actually put way more labor into it than we can actually get out. To be the best that it can be, we need to receive test pressings so that we can hear it with you and then communicate with you and for you to the pressing plant. There's a language all of its own. Any one of our clients that wants to reach out and talk to the pressing plant about some noises that they heard on the record might find they're not be terribly responsive. Test pressings are noisy. I forgot to say that earlier. Do not be surprised if your test pressing is noisier than your final pressing. It's actually a good thing. If you can tolerate the noise level on your test pressing or come close, your final pressing will almost always be quieter. And it should be, because instead of using those first 2 or 3 or the first 20, they've probably discarded the first 50 off of the press. They put them back into the regrinds and reuse them, unless it's custom, unless it's custom colors.
Yeah.
But test pressings cost some money because they literally have to stop the production on the press, put your plates on, let the press get up to speed, throw away a bunch of waffles, and then send you 20 pressings that they hope are correct. And most of the plants that we deal with also have in-house quality control that will catch problems. We're just there to make sure they're catching all the ones that we need to catch. We're a little bit finer detail. A little harder to impress us. But that's it. I think that's everything about the test pressings. They're really a vital and important part of the process. So until next time, thanks for watching. Garrett?
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on Making Vinyl at Masterdisk.